Before we begin, allow me to explain the difference between a remake, a remaster, a reboot and a reimagining, as many video game journalists and others don't seem to clearly know about this. A remake is when you rebuild a game from scratch with completely different technology, but the original stays set as the core template of its design. Popular examples of remakes are Resident Evil and Crash Bandicoot N. Sane Trilogy. Some that are not as popular as they change the core game too much, for example, are Metal Gear Solid: The Twin Snakes, Conker's Live and Reloaded and Super Mario 64 DS. And yes, I'm aware that everybody is naming only these three. Listen, this demo came out of nowhere, I don't have a lot of time for this as it is, okay? A remaster is when the original game, or rather the majority of its code, is still being used and expanded upon within a new re-release. May that be by increasing resolution, changing textures, changing the music, etc. You have to be a little careful here though, as, for example, the Elder Scrolls Skyrim Special Edition would count as a remaster. The original Skyrim with add-ons, however, would not, as that's just a game with additional content. Popular examples of remasters include The Legend of Zelda: The Wind Waker HD, an okay remaster is Red Faction Guerrilla Remastered, and a bad remaster is the Hitman HD Collection. You can easily spot a reboot if it intends to completely restart a game or franchise. They are based on the original, but to which extent differs heavily. It can range from using the exact same story, gameplay, levels, etc. to only vague designs surviving the transition. Some examples that are commonly perceived as positives are Tomb Raider or Shadow Warrior, but there are a lot more negative examples like Sonic the Hedgehog, Thief, Bomberman, Act Zero or Prince of Persia. Reimaginings are a lot harder to spot and are often not advertised as such. A reimagining is essentially a combination of a remake and a reboot, using the original as a basis while still changing the core design to a potentially extreme extent. The original game code is not being used in this process. Half-Life Black Mesa is a positive example of this. Pokemon Let's Go is more of a controversial choice, and I suppose you could say that Star Fox 64 is a reimagining of the first Star Fox. Simple ports onto other consoles usually do not fall under this category, because the game in question is already a remake, remaster, reboot, reimagining, or the original. Welcome, dear viewers. If you haven't heard it yet, THQ Nordic released a demo of a potential Gothic 1 remake in form of a reimagining. Piranha Bytes is not involved at all, thank you, and the engine being used is the Unreal Engine 4. The new developer is THQ Nordic Barcelona, a studio which was founded a few months ago. I played the demo, and while I couldn't record any footage as my hardware is old, I still want to share my thoughts, and I will tell you the same feedback that I sent back to the developers after filling out my survey. Most importantly, you will need to have played the demo yourself in order to know what I'm talking about. You can gain access to it by owning Gothic 1, 2 or 3, Risen 1, 2 or 3, or Elex on GOG or Steam. Then you just need to look at the shop for a Gothic Playable teaser, download it and go playing. Have fun! Let's begin. First off, the game needs to leave more player freedom to the player. Not having the ability to play or progress the way I want, like not being able to skip Bloodwind's quests, was a little frustrating. I don't mind the context-sensitive jumping as it fixes many issues in the old mine and the sleeper temple, and the animations have somewhat of a clunky charm to them. The combat is giving the player too much of an advantage. The reason for that is in the fact that enemies are not aggressive enough in combat and are thus easy to button mash to death. Stamina is implemented in a thought-out manner similar to For Honor and already surpasses any of Piranha Bytes' designed stamina mechanics. If this project progresses, an increase of enemy aggressiveness is absolutely necessary, otherwise the combat system will fail for the same reasons as Risen 3. For example, right now it's too easy to stunlock enemies to death by light stabbing, holding W for about 0.75 seconds after the previous animation finished, light stab again, rinse and repeat. The hero needs to be more roguish and confident, but not to an extreme extent. I know you want him to be more juvenile at the beginning, but it would contradict his sudden confidence boost later. You need to decide for either one. More confidence, which would mean cutting half of the commentary, or more natural development during main quest dialogues, like with Satyrus at the start of chapter 4. His voice will also need more oomph or maturity to it as the game progresses, or else it will become unfitting, similar to the original Gothic 1 English dub. Other than that, Diego and Ori have changed personalities, but I don't dislike this at all. The new personalities are just as charming as the old ones, but for different reasons. The English voice acting is also miles ahead of the old one. However, Bloodwind needs to sound more like a jackass, no pun intended. The new pendant quest is amazing as a way to introduce the god lore, and I loved every minute of it, with the exception of 2 occasions. Killing an NPC this early on without much issue, and not being able to rob Rufus and let him live at the same time. Though that's a nitpick in this situation. Rufus's voice acting was great. The music isn't bad or annoying. It's not memorable or great either. Although, honestly, I really kinda had a tingle when I heard the main theme of Gothic again. I fucking love that tune. However, I can't tell in which musical direction the team wants to go, so this could be to their advantage. The Hermann Likita jingle, however, was fantastically nostalgic. Just as fantastic as the new images for items, notes, etc. These are definitely some of the best modern RPG features, and it just adds so much to the atmosphere. Speaking of which, I enjoyed the graphics, but they look too much like generic RPG fare at the moment. I think if you dull the colors and basically create a nice looking muddier filter onto character models, armor textures, etc., then it should look a bit more like Gothic. I'm not too sure about that though. The monsters you fight require the forename Young, definitely. Otherwise, the real snappers, scavengers, and wolves just come across as jokes. The sound design so far is really a lot to my liking. It could use a bit more of an impact when landing a strong hit, but I wouldn't mind this kind of sound design at all. Although I would have to hear it in action within a forest at night or the old mine, where Gothic 1's sound design kinda struggled the most, alongside the Sleeper Temple. The user interface is too reminiscent of consoles and would become a bit of a micromanagement nightmare as soon as chapter 3, kinda like Fable. The opening cutscene was absolutely fantastic! I didn't like how the hero was given the letter, but I don't know where the team wants to go with that plotline yet, so I can't really complain about that. Similarly, the scare snapper on the bridge is unnecessary, and being almost killed by snappers isn't a good replacement in comparison to Bullet. Bullet's welcoming committee was important to show the player the tone of the game and to give him a character to despise at the earliest stage. With the snappers, this personal element to the player in the game's intro is frankly missing. You need a bullet to give the player an immediate prejudice towards the old camp. Bloodwind isn't enough for that. He's the cherry on top, not the main course. Anyway, I've been playing Gothic 1 and the entire series since its release in 2001. If you've been listening until now, thank you, and I hope the team takes my criticism to heart. I, for one, have been convinced and I would support this reimagining of the Gothic franchise, even pre-order it, if I am convinced of its technical stability at launch. I personally believe Gothic has the potential to surpass both The Elder Scrolls and The Witcher. It just needs to have some good luck for once.